I'm so excited for my guest today on the Visibility Standard. I have been following her journey on social media way back when she was dancing until she found her voice, her confidence. And so I'm so excited to be able to have a conversation about her visibility, her latest book, and what it's been like to navigate being visible while sharing her story. Rachel Havekost, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jasmine. I'm really happy to be here.
So take us way back. I mean, early TikTok, where you were building your page and building your voice.
Yeah, back in 2019, I was going through the very early stages of a divorce. And prior to that, my ex-husband and I had sold all of our belongings and done like a 10-month motorcycle trip through Latin America. So while I was like in the sort of the process of figuring out like if I was going to be married in the next year or not, I also was trying to figure out where I was going to live and what I was going to do for work because we had both quit our jobs and sold everything. So I was really starting from scratch. And I had always wanted to write a book about my eating disorder because when I was diagnosed in 2005, there were not that many stories out there about folks with eating disorders. Social media did not exist and people were not talking about mental health and they were definitely not talking about eating disorders. And so after many, many years and going through treatment and really wanting to find a way to like pay it forward from the support I'd received in therapy, I thought that using sort of like my background of the arts and storytelling could be a way for me to share my story and fill some kind of gap so that there could be at least one more story in the world for young women to read about if they were struggling with an eating disorder. Anyways, fast forward to end of 2019, my ex-husband and I are about to get a divorce. I have literally nothing to lose. And I just thought to myself, you know what? Fuck it. Like this is the time. Like if I ever had time to write a book and start sharing my story, it would be now. So January 1st, 2020, I launched my blog. I changed all of my Instagram content from just like photos of whatever I was doing to being more related to mental health and my experiences with mental illness. And I downloaded TikTok because I just thought, I'll try this out too. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like I did not know how to use the app. I was like classic, like chuggy millennial, like just really, it was ridiculous. But anyway, so then COVID happened and everybody was online, myself included. And people were really, really struggling. And I think for the first time, really had to like sit with a lot of their emotions and their thoughts and not have the distractions of day-to-day life, but also like being disconnected socially can be really, really hard on our mental health. So I think a lot of people were really struggling and looking for something online to help them feel less alone. So unfortunately, my timing was good because people were looking for that kind of content. My TikTok started to, hit a lot of the right spaces and people were really resonating. And it just kind of evolved from there. I wrote my book. I kept using social media as a way for me to advocate, destigmatize, dance. I used to do a lot of dancing, as you know. And it's been almost 6 years now, which is crazy.
Yeah, and it was one of the first profiles that I recognized that was blending mental health storytelling and more trendier styles of content and that storytelling aspect that so many people were craving, especially during the pandemic. And now, like you said, 6 years later, you're on your second book. You are still using social media as a means to advocate and destigmatize. What is it like to still be visible for you?
It's honestly really hard. It's a lot harder now than it was when I started. And I think there's several reasons for that. I think the first one being when I started, nobody knew my face. So there were, in some ways, it was less risky because I could put out a flop or something that didn't hit. And my ego did not care because it's not like anyone was really paying attention to what I was doing anyways. So anytime I did really well or felt like I was succeeding, I was really just seeing my wins. I wasn't seeing my losses. And I think now that I've experienced a lot of success, my brain has started to see losses more than it sees wins. As well, like I feel like there are more eyes on me. So I have started to filter myself more. Whereas I don't think I was filtering myself as much when I first started. Now I feel like I have a much bigger responsibility to be really mindful and careful with my language, with my content. And so I think in a lot of ways that I think that's really good. And I think in a lot of ways it has stifled me sometimes creatively because I get really anxious about what people are going to think, because now there's a lot of people that see what I put out there and what I write about and what I talk about. And it's my personal life. It's pretty vulnerable. And I made a conscious choice when I started using social media to give that part of my life, my privacy up. Like I knew that's what I was doing, and I really sat with that for a while. And I understood the risks. I understood, what I was consenting to in terms of not having a lot of privacy when sharing those kinds of things. In many ways, I'm comfortable with it, but there are times where I just long for a life outside of social media where nobody knows who I
Mhm.
am or what I'm doing. And not that like a lot of people know who I am, but in the sense of like, I'm not constantly sharing like the the darkest, hardest parts of my life online. I also have noticed, and this is like a really positive thing in the last several years, so many people are talking about mental health. Like you
Mhm.
open up social media and it's just like, this is what my therapist said to me. This is what it means if you have an avoidant attachment style. Here's how I'm healing my trauma. Like it is everywhere. And I think that's so fantastic. And so a part of me also feels like my job's done. Like I set out, my mission was to help one person feel less alone and to create safe spaces online where people could feel like they could talk about their mental health. And I feel like that is happening in tenfold.
Mhm.
And not that that's because of me, but I feel like if that's what I wanted to happen and it's happening, that's fantastic. So I think also in some ways, I feel like there are so many other people who have incredible stories to share and incredible wisdom to share. I think that has also created some like comparison in my mind around like, do I like, who am I to even keep talking anymore? Like, do I even need to share my story? Like I've sort of
Mhm.
done it. But also I think there's a lot of space to share, and it's not all mine. So
I appreciate your transparency and discussing the journey of visibility. I think especially in today's like content space, people are really excited to have so many eyes on them and excited to share their story publicly. And the trade-off to that is you recognize the losses. There is a lot more feedback that's coming in when you're sharing your personal story. There is a level of creativity. Sometimes I think people think it will amplify it the more engagement they get, but it can stifle it too because it's like, I really need to be thoughtful. I have this many people watching me. I need to be thoughtful of what I'm saying, what I'm sharing, what the messaging is that I want to get out there. And so I love that you talk about the duality that does exist when creating content publicly. So you are on your second book. Look up
hmm
a guide
yes.
for navigating life's uncertainty and finding your horizon. What was the inspiration behind this book?
After I wrote my memoir in 2021, I was super, super depressed and burned out. I think writing that book was really hard. I had to go back to like my childhood and sort of like relive and look through parts of my life that I did not want to revisit, parts of my life that were like beautiful parts of my life that then created sort of like a nostalgic grief of how things used to be. I had to relive like my marriage and falling in love and then getting divorced. So it really like stalled my grief. And I think it was an exhausting process. So I took a lot of time off of writing after that to grieve and to do a lot of work in therapy and just let myself sort of take a pause from some of that really intense writing. And during that time, I had started to think about writing a book of poetry. I really liked writing like short form, sort of more like hopeful, inspirational, like gentle reminders, mantras, the kind of thing that like if I was sort of in that period that I had been in, like a post-it I could have grabbed and been like, okay, I can hold on to this for the day. Especially because at that time my attention span was like zero. So if you'd given me a book on trauma or healing, I would have barely gotten through a page. But small reminders were something I could digest. And so I wanted to create that for someone who was possibly in that same mental or physical space, but I was not at that time. I was too tired and burned out. And so it was really just an idea. I think it was about a year ago, last summer, I went to a mental health summit in Chicago and met some brilliant creators. And one of them is also a writer. So we were kind of like sharing our like writing woes. And he was asking me if there was a book I was working on. I was like, well, I've been thinking about this book of poetry, but I really don't know. I was like, I really don't know if I should self-publish or if I try and find a publisher. And he was like, well, why don't I introduce you to my publisher so that you can like have somebody to support you and you can just get started.
Mhm.
And I was like, A, thank you. Wow, that's amazing. But B, crap, I just now I have to start writing. Shit. Like this is the accountability that I needed but did not want to ask for. But I'm so grateful to him because that did get me to start writing. Because then there was like fire under my ass. Like there was someone who was going to read my work and decide if it was good enough to be published. And I started writing. And so I started writing last summer and finished the book in December, and it just got published this June. So it's short little. I have a copy here. Hang on. So it's short little, just like gentle reminders to kind of
Mm.
pick up at any point, and you can open to any page, and there will be something in there, but it's divided into sections. And I'm like very anal and methodical when it comes to writing. So there is sort of like a through line that has like a beginning until end. So if you read it from the beginning to end, that you'll feel this arc that kind of starts with, being in a place where you feel stuck, unable to move forward, unable to let go of the past, and sort of, being able to honor that tension and then moving through letting go and the process of letting go, feeling incredibly lost once we've let go of what's behind us, starting to like really discover ourselves again and who we are, and then letting ourselves kind of come back into the world, experiencing all of the doubt that happens when we finally like reemerge, and then kind of coming to a place of like deep acceptance of like, okay, this is it. This is the mess that I've chosen, and I'm going to keep moving forward.
What events in your life would you say were the biggest inspiration for this book?
Getting divorced, for sure. I think there's a lot of grief and love and loneliness in this book that I felt immensely going through my divorce. And I have, I've lost people in my life. People who, I love have died, and I've experienced grief, when someone has passed, but I had never experienced this kind of grief before. And it was utterly perplexing to me that grieving someone who was alive could feel as painful as grieving someone who was dead. And this is going to sound so morbid, but there were so many times where I wished that he had died because it would have been easier if he was
Mhm.
gone. At least it would have been concrete. But to know that he was still out there in the world, but that he was no longer mine was in some ways a lot harder to navigate. It was a lot harder for me to get closure and to move forward and accept that we were not, that we were no longer a partnership, that he was not in my life anymore, that this person that I had imagined a future with was not going to be in my future. There was just so much nuance and gray. And it was also really lonely. Like, when somebody dies and we have a funeral or a ceremony, we gather together to remember them, to talk about them. On birthdays, we should, like, that person's life lives on in community. I mean, that doesn't happen when you get divorced or when you
Yeah.
have a breakup. And so I felt very alone in my grief. And like I wasn't allowed to mourn him or remember him out loud. It felt
Mhm.
taboo or like shameful to miss somebody that I was not in a marriage with anymore. So I think that really instilled in me a desire to create some kind of space for people to grieve who felt like they were grieving alone, and also just some permission to grieve when we feel like we're not allowed to. I remember like when I was 18, my high school sweetheart died, and I remember feeling like I wasn't allowed to grieve. I felt like I hadn't been a good enough friend to him. I wasn't close enough to him. Like I just, for some reason, had this belief that I wasn't allowed to grieve him. I wish that someone had told me, like, you can grieve, you can absolutely grieve this person. Like,
Mhm.
if you feel sad, it's because you loved them and you get to experience that. In fact, like, it is loving of you to grieve someone who is gone. And so I think I really just wanted to be able to provide those reminders for people who are going through that grief, but also going through the deep uncertainty of self discovery of who am I without this person, or
Mm.
who am I without this job? Who am I without this idea of myself? Like when we go through these huge life changes, or when we're figuring out who we are in our early 20s, and it's like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Like there's so much uncertainty, and that can also feel really isolating. But the truth is, we all experience that uncertainty like all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, when I hear you talk about the journey, I hear the, like, immense grief that you experienced, but I also hear this permission to explore your identity a bit more, like, who you
Mhm.
are, outside of the marriage, who you are as a person and as a professional. What has that journey been like?
Yeah, that's been really interesting because sometimes I think about like who I would be if I was still married, and I can't even like picture that woman. And I was talking to my therapist about this week, but I remember like right when Josh and I got divorced, I just turned 31, I think. And I remember thinking about, starting to write and share my story. And I knew that I was going to have to talk about my childhood, which meant I was going to have to talk about my parents. And I remember that being like a really big barrier to me writing because I was really afraid, that my mom would take everything personally, that my dad would just say nothing and that would further exacerbate my beliefs that he wasn't proud of me. And it really got in my way for a long time. And I remember like having this moment like right after my birthday where I was like, I'm a 31-year-old adult grown ass woman. Like this is my life. And I get to choose what I do with it. Yes, I can choose how I do it. Yes, I can be kind. Yes, I can be respectful, but also this is my life. Like why am I still so concerned with what my parents are going to think? And I think like giving myself sort of that like permission to be a woman, to be an adult, but also make choices without attachment to like, what are my parents going to do or think, but also what is my husband going to think? Like it gave me sort of this freedom for the first time probably in my life to make my own choices based on what I wanted and based on what I needed and based on what I thought was the right thing to do for me and for others. And so I think in the process of starting to share my story, I also started to really take ownership of who I was. Like I was telling stories about myself and my life, which meant that like I had to hold myself accountable in a lot of ways too. And I also had to figure out like how to do things on my own. Like I was so embarrassed when Josh and I got separated because there were so many things that I realized I was reliant on him for. Like I was in Bali at one point and I wanted to rent a scooter. And the first thing I thought was like, I should call Josh and have him figure out how I can rent a scooter while I'm in Bali and he's halfway across the world. And I remember thinking like, good God, Rachel, like you can't figure out how to rent a scooter by yourself? Like, girl, like, like we're gonna get it together. And so I had to like, I just had to figure out like small stuff like that. Like, and over the last like 5.5, 6 years, I don't feel different. Like I am still me. Like definitely still Rachel, but I am so much less apologetic for who I am. And I do things that I want to do. I do things the way I want to do them. I like myself. I think I'm pretty cool. I'm not perfect. Like there's shit about myself I don't like and that I'd like to work through. But I am really comfortable with who I am and the way I express myself. And it's taken me a while to get there. And I think that, I think having to be completely independent and on my own in a lot of ways forced me to do that. But I think it also forced me to recognize some of the parts of myself that I wasn't really happy with, that I didn't, that I wasn't really proud of when it came to like how I was in relationships or in my marriage or with myself. And I had to also like really learn how to forgive myself, how to accept myself. And those are ongoing practices. Like doing that did not like close a loop where I now am like, and I am perfectly healed. Like it's a practice of like, how can I continue to forgive myself? How can I continue to accept myself in times when I make a mistake, in times when I don't act exactly the way I want to, or think, the way I'd like to about myself or the world. So it's definitely like an ongoing process. Also, if you probably remember, like when I started my TikTok, this girl with blonde, like I had like maybe 5 tattoos and now I have like 55. Like I looked a lot different too. And so I think also like, not that appearance really matters, but I think I allowed myself to physically express myself the way that I wanted to without fear of, what people might think, which has been pretty liberating as well.
One of the not so obvious, I feel like, benefits to being visible is the level of ownership you learn how to take, not only for what you create, but what you do in your life. Like,
Mm,
I'm willing to own this post, I'm willing to own what I say online. That ultimately translates into, well, I'm also willing to own the choices that I make in my life. I'm willing to own the travel, the relationships that I engage in. And if I don't like it, I get to change it. Like I get that
mhm.
choice. And
And I think that that's something that I lately have really struggled with. So thank you for that reminder because I've noticed lately, like especially in my writing and in, the content I put on social media, and it's not that I am afraid to own things. I think it's that I am in this space that feels kind of like a limbo place where like I don't really know what to own. Like it sort of feels like I am thinking more about what other people want to see rather than having an original thought and then owning it and putting it out in the world. And I think that's a really good reminder for me to like allow myself to own things, like to be brave and bold with what I believe and to own it. Because I did feel that way for quite a long time. And I feel like that part of myself has in some ways I've lost touch with it. And it's something I want to rekindle. So thanks.
Of course. I remember a post that you did fairly recently, but you were reflecting on the different ways you showed up online, whether it was the font that you were using, the information that you were sharing. What was it like to do that exercise and really reflect on the different stages you've been online?
Yeah, it's really funny you say that because literally this morning before we got on our call, I spent about an hour on Canva, like with one post, making it different fonts, different colors, like trying to figure out a new way to like have different branding. Like I was literally it's that moment of like, I'm gonna change all of my branding right now with absolutely no plan whatsoever. And it's gonna be great. It was humbling, but also I think it was like for anyone listening for context, like I went through all of my posts from 2020 until now and reposted like two from every year of like visually how the content changed, but also kind of like what was in like like the content of the content. Initially, I did it just because I thought it might be interesting or relatable. But while I was pulling stuff, I realized I kind of watched my own growth over the last 5 years. And I had a lot of softness for myself and a lot of pride because I could visually see the ebbs and flows in my own mental health coming through the content. Like I could see through certain posts, like, oh, yeah, that was a time where I was really struggling,
Mm.
having a really hard time, really depressed, and just so lost in my thoughts. And my content sort of reflected that. I sort of felt like I was wading through a really dark ocean when I kind of found myself again and felt like I saw my content kind of get really clear and sharp and wise and there was a lot of that ownership that you're talking about. Like I could feel myself owning something and like really being like not like not being like and this is how things are, but having a really strong belief and caring about something and really and wanting to put it out there. I just was able to like witness myself sort of go through these ebbs and flows, and I think that that was it was a good reminder to me that like in these times where I feel like kind of like I am right now, where I'm in this limbo of like I'm sort of swimming in that ocean again of not really knowing what way to go or where the land is or how I'm going to get there, and I'm sort of floating aimlessly. That there's always a moment when I do find dry ground, and
Mhm.
when I do, I come out with a lot of stability and feeling really sturdy and having something to say about the journey. So I think it was helpful for me to remember, like, oh yeah, like this we go through these ebbs and flows. We've done this before, Rach, and every time we come out and there's something on the other side. And I think it also, like I said before, created a lot of softness for myself to witness my past self go through these things and remember what it was like then to wonder, like, what in the fucking world is going to happen 5 years from now and to be
Mhm.
here, be able to look back and say, like, it's okay. Like, we're all right. Like, we made it. So,
Yeah, it's that journey of self-discovery that you talk about, and you've been so transparent about your journey with your eating disorder, and that is still something that is prevalent in your content. And now you are exploring sharing what it's like your soberest journey, like what that's like to share publicly. What has that been like to experience it and then try and share it with the world?
yeah. So that was definitely something that I wanted to really make a sort of private decision about whether or not I would share it publicly or not. And there were a couple reasons for that. One was I wanted to make sure that I was committed to it before I shared it.
Mm.
And so I wanted to give myself time to really settle into sobriety. It felt like if I say something like on day one of like, I'm going to stop drinking, it just didn't feel real. I needed to do it for myself first before I did it in in the presence of others. And the other thing too, Jasmine, was I was so like, this was something that stopped me from getting sober for a really long time. Like, I did not want another fucking label. I just was like, why is there another thing? Like
Mhm.
eating disorder, depression, anxiety, trauma. I have to get substance use abuse too. Like, really? Like, why? Like, can't I be done? Like, I just want to be done. Like,
Mhm.
and I was so tired of having something else that I was having to work through, something else that was wrong, something else that, and some other reason that life wasn't going well for me. And so there was a lot of shame as well. And I also didn't want to make it my identity. Like, I didn't want to be like the sober girl or the girl that like is always talking about her sobriety or preaching about it or, trying to get other people to stop. I wanted to do it for me. I knew I needed to do it for my mental health. And I just told myself, like, and you can decide if you share it publicly later. Like, right now, like, the most important thing is that you get sober and that you take care of yourself. So I just committed to that first. And then I think about, like a month, maybe like 6 weeks later, I thought to myself, like, one of the biggest things that I have learned in like the last 20 years of, being in and out of therapy and treatment is that, recovery doesn't work alone and accountability is really important. And it's very, very hard for a disease to thrive when there are so many people involved. So I just knew that if I shared publicly, that would be like I am nailing in my accountability. Like I am
Mhm.
really now like saying like this is something I'm committed to. So in some ways it felt like it felt like something that I was also doing for myself. Like by putting it out there publicly, I was really saying this is something I'm committed to. And now I'm really truly accountable because I'm talking about it. And I was a little bit nervous about like what people would I mean, it was less that I was nervous about what people would think and more just like I wondered if people would see it as, oh, here's Rachel on her high horse preaching about sobriety and I don't want to have anything to do with that. Which if that's what people think, that's okay. That's fine. Like I used to feel that way about people too. So I just really wanted to talk about it from a place of like, this is just what's happening in my life. It's not something that I'm telling you you need to do. If it's something you're also doing, great. You don't have to do it alone. Really, the most important thing is that the people in my immediate life have done nothing but be supportive and love hard on me. And that was the really scary thing was what if my friends don't want to hang out with me anymore or don't understand or don't think that I needed to stop drinking. But I've received nothing but a lot of love and care, which I'm super grateful for.
One of the more salient aspects of your journey with drinking is a lot of your posts center around being able to highlight the things that haven't changed and allowing yourself to be present. And when we think about loss and change and grief and all of those big topics, it's really nice to be able to lean into things that have remained steady when we're going through really big life transitions.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that. Like I really I thought a lot of things. Like I thought a lot was going to change. Like I thought I was going to have some big like physical transformation, that I was going to like have a glow up. I thought that I was going to have like tons and tons of energy and like be this whole new like robotic like magical human being with all these just like super clarity and like be thinking really sharply and my memory was going to be on fire. Like I just visualized like numbers like flashing in front of me all the time. I also thought like socially a lot of big things were going to change. I thought like I was going to lose a lot of friends. I thought it was going to be incredibly hard to be out and not drink. I thought, I thought I would have crazy bad social anxiety or discover that I have absolutely no. I just thought there would be these like grandiose changes. And the reality is like nothing has really changed that much. Like I would say things have changed like 5%. I do sleep better. My memory is a little bit better. I do go out a little bit less. Like I come home at 11 instead of 2 a.m. I still have social anxiety. Like things are not drastically different. They're pretty much the same. And in some ways, I initially was like, oh, that's not good because now I have no reason to stay sober. Like I thought things were going to be so much better that it would be like an obvious, why would I start drinking again? Because things are so much better. But the truth is, I'm realizing like, oh, like things are the same, which means that drinking actually wasn't making my life better. Like the only thing drinking was really doing was giving me hangovers, making me cancel plans, making me feel like a shithead or irresponsible, making me forget conversations, do things I regretted. Like my life is the same, except that these bad things aren't happening because I'm not drinking. So I think getting to have that reframe of like, oh, it's not that my life is going to have this drastic rehaul and like revamp. It's that I'm actually present in my life. And so the things that have stayed the same, I'm remembering, I am more equipped to handle, I'm showing up for them. And like, I feel like a baseline mentally every day. And so nothing has changed, but everything has.
Mhm. I resonate with so much of what you said as somebody who has also had to evaluate their relationship to drinking. One of the major things I noticed first was the improvement in sleep. I was like,
Mhm.
hell yeah, like I'm going to bed, I wake up, feel good, no anxiety, like I don't regret anything I did the day before. But I also recognize drinking was more of a neutral point. It wasn't making my life better. Sometimes it made it worse, but for the most part, like it wasn't like I really wasn't missing anything. And so the real question became, okay, then what were the choices that I was making while drinking that were making things like much more complicated?
Mhm.
And so I really appreciate your transparency and that journey and allowing us into even a facet of what it's been like.
My pleasure.
So, what do you foresee for yourself when it comes to showing up online? I hear parts of you that are like, if I could retire this gig and retreat, like that would be really cool. And there's parts of you that I feel like aren't done with sharing and advocating. And so, what do you see for yourself?
It's a really good question, and it's one that I ask myself a lot these days. I don't know. I deeply long for more stability and security in my career, and social media, at least for me, does not provide that, nor does writing. It's a very up and down line of work, and I also long for collaboration. Like I work mostly alone, and I really want to work with others. Like I want to work on a team and with people and brainstorm and, have a space to collaborate and also get feedback and have that kind of sort of structure that a team brings. I know that that's something that I'm longing for after, just after almost 6 years of working with just me. There are a lot of people up here, but they're kind of like running in circles. But yeah, and I also, I think when it comes to social media, I think I said this a little bit before, but it sort of feels like it's a really saturated space right now. And part of me wants to just take a step back rather than like trying to continue to. I don't know how much of that is like my own fear of, not being good enough or not standing out, and how much of that is actually just me knowing that it's my time to take a step back. And so I think I'm wrestling with that right now of trying to recognize which it is. And I also know that like I am a lifelong creative person. Like I've always like since I was a kid been an incredibly like creative, artistic human, and I need creativity in my life to feel fulfilled. And this is something I was talking to my therapist about. Like, right now I've noticed that all of my creativity gets poured into work, which means when I'm not working, I don't have a full cup in my creative bin to work from. So I'm lacking in hobbies and personal projects. And I miss that. Like I want to learn how to play the piano and I want to start painting again. But right now I don't have the energy to because I used all of that. I use it all in work. So I'd like to find a balance there. So I don't have a concrete answer for you. The answer is I'm figuring that out, and I'm really letting myself take my time to do it because in the past I've been quite impulsive. I have an idea and I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. It's usually I do it well, but I think at this point in my life, I want to try something different. So I'm going slow. I'm evaluating sort of my landscape and gathering information, and then I will hopefully make an educated decision based on the information and the data. But yeah, that's kind of like where my heart is right now. So
Mhm. Well, the evidence exists within your content. I fully believe that you'll land on your feet no matter what you decide. and wherever you choose to transition. I just know it'll be super impactful.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
What would you say to someone who wants to pursue creativity but is afraid of being perceived by others?
I would say that is a really healthy way to feel. I would be more concerned if you had absolutely no fear of being perceived. I think that fear is really human. So that's the first thing I would say. And then I would say go slow. There's no rush to put all of yourself all out there all at once. So sort of ask yourself, like, what am I comfortable with being perceived right now? Is it a certain way I tell that story? It's like for some people, like having their face on camera is the thing that's the scariest, right? It's not necessarily what they're saying or what they're sharing, it's the actual physically being perceived, which is why it's so great that we can share text or we can do like videos that are like telling a story that have no like faces or pictures of our own face. If it's certain parts of your story, keep those private until you feel comfortable sharing them. Like when I started writing and sharing, I don't think I talked about my divorce until like a year after I got divorced. It took me a long time to feel comfortable sharing that. And there were certain parts of my mental health that I did not share for years. Like I talked a lot about my eating disorder, but I talked about it very, very vaguely. Like I was not that specific. The way I write about my life now is so different than the way I started. And that's because when I started, what I wrote was what I was comfortable with being perceived. So I would say allow that fear to be a reminder that you are human and that you are healthy, and uh, sort of see that aspect or that concept of perception as being on a scale, and allow yourself to start where you feel okay with, and trust that along the way you'll either get more comfortable with being perceived over here, or you won't, and this is a beautiful place for you to be. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. This is such an inspiring conversation, and I'm so excited for my audience to hear it. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jasmine.